Students, welcome to your notes for our new unit. This is Unit 3, Lesson 3.1, and your notes are titled Welfarist or Rightist today. For our notes today, we're going to be investigating what is right or wrong around animals and about the different philosophies or belief systems around that question. So at any point throughout the video, please remember to pause the video if you need more time, and then just hit play. Based on timing, I'm going to keep cruising, but you can always hit pause and then pick up where we left off. So when we talk about animal rights and welfare, the big thing that we're getting at is if animals have value. So to start out with that, we need to look at what is the definition of value. So when we determine if something has value, whether it's this pen or an animal, what we're saying is it has value in one of these different ways. It might have relative worth or merit or importance. That would be things like the value of an education. It could be something that has a monetary value or worth, like this granola bar probably costs 75 cents at a grocery store. It could be something that has like meaning or significance to you, like a picture of your grandma. It could be something that you have a like or affection for, some sort of favorable regard, like a student gave me this cute sheep cup and I've held on to it for 10 years. Or it could be something that's important to you because of your ideals, your customs, your institutions, maybe your religious background. All of those things can come together to determine what something or the value that something has. So that applies to animals as well. And all of these different things can make it complicated to know how our society and even how we ourselves value different animals. So I would propose that on the right side of the screen here, these 4 animals all have value. I would like you to real quickly write down what are these 4 animals. Give me a Y or N, yes or no, you think they have value. And then write down the number. Which type of value do you think they have if you think they have value? Pause the video for a second, give everybody a second to do that, and then I'm going to talk about my part, or my opinion. Okay, so again, I already told you that I think all these animals have value, but I think that value is really determined by your culture and your approach. So for example, polar bears, I think they have relative worth and merit. They're a really important animal. They're on the endangered species list. They're a capstone species, so if we lose them, it like completely changes the ecosystem. However, if I lived in a region with polar bears and they were trying to break into my garage every night, I might not value polar bears in exactly the same way. I probably would think they're still important, but I would have frustrations with polar bears, right? Next up, the eagle. So I think eagles definitely have value in the same sort of way that polar bears do, but you may have also written down that eagles have value because of our ideals and customs in the United States. The eagle represents the USA, and so you might have an affection or a value for that bird in a way that other countries around the world, nope, not at all, right? How about the cow? So the cow, you could definitely put a monetary value on. You could say there's dollars and cents related to that cow. But depending on your cultural background, you may or may not be okay with the use of cattle for humans. And then finally, the mosquito. So the mosquito is probably the one where you were maybe like, I don't know if that has value. I hate mosquitoes. I think most people in the world can agree with that. We dislike mosquitoes. Okay? I apologize if you're Hindu, you may have a different opinion of that if you have a Hindu background. But I would say that mosquitoes have value even for those of us who dislike them. Going back to ecosystem ideas, mosquitoes are incredibly numerous around the world. And though, yes, they are real annoying and yes, they cause lots of disease, they also control populations. Some of those diseases that they produce help make sure that we don't have vermin everywhere and don't have animals that are problems. They also are a huge food source for like most of the world's birds. So if we didn't have mosquitoes, it might be nice for me, but it might be bad for the planet. So it's kind of tricky sometimes to figure out value. And because of that, we actually have these different belief systems or philosophies around the values that animals have that we try to understand them by putting them into big categories. So let's get some definitions down about the different belief systems around animals. Okay, so the first, in no particular order, there's not one of these that's better than the other, but the first we're going to talk about is the philosophy or belief system about animal welfare. So if you are an animal welfarist, or you identify this way, you believe that animals should be treated in a kind and caring manner. So that implies that you think it's okay for humans to use animals as long as you're meeting their needs and they're receiving appropriate care. Now, there's a couple problems with that. First problem with that is, how do we know what appropriate means? I might think one thing's appropriate and you might think something else is appropriate. How do we agree? How do we know that we are both treating that animal appropriately when we don't have a clear definition of what appropriate is? And also, are all uses okay as long as I provide good care? So for example, down here in the corner, we have a recent article, at least recent when I made the video. December 22nd, 2018 is the first time that a federal ban on cockfighting, which is chickens fighting to death, took place and became effective in all U.S. territories. It was only in December 2018 that it's illegal to have cockfighting in all U.S. territories. So up until that point, that was a use that was okay. And culturally, for some people it is, especially like in Puerto Rico, cockfighting has a grand and deep cultural tradition, and now suddenly it's illegal, and that's sort of an issue in Puerto Rico right now. So the challenge is, what does appropriate mean, and is the use okay? Um, and that is the difficulty of being an animal welfarist. So you believe it's okay to use animals, but you have to kind of walk this line of figuring out what does appropriate mean and to bring our society to a common definition. Now, up in the right corner, you guys can see some basically some icons or some insignias of some different organizations that you might be familiar with that are identified as animal welfare agencies. So these agencies work to help make sure that we are having some standard of appropriate care in the United States, at least. Okay, so another philosophical or belief system that you could be a part of is if you are an animal rightist. So an animal rightist believes that animals have similar rights or the same rights as humans, and therefore it's probably not okay for us to use them in some of the ways that we do, or it's not okay to use them for human consumption. Now, the big thing to remember about this is that this is a big umbrella term. If you are an animal rights person, it doesn't mean that you are one thing. You might be lots of different things. So, for example, you might believe that it's not okay to eat animals. And so that might mean that you're a vegetarian and you just don't eat meat. It could mean that you don't think it's okay to eat animals or any parts of animals, in which case you might avoid meats, cheese, and eggs. Or it could mean that you think it's inappropriate for us to use animals in any, like, we don't want to consume their bodies in any way, in which case you might be vegan and avoid all of the food-based uses, but also byproduct uses. So you might avoid lotions and other cosmetic products that have animal byproducts in them. Some people think that it's even further than that and that we shouldn't use animals at all. And it's not okay to have animals as service animals. It's not okay to use animals for entertainment. And it's not okay for people to own pets. So an animal rights person or a person who believes in animal rights could fall anywhere under a real big umbrella. But it is a term that we use to describe the belief that animals have similar rights to humans, and therefore some things are not okay. Another way to look at this belief system is under the idea of dominion, and if humans have the right to control animals. There are different levels to this as well. One is absolute, which is the belief that humans have absolute control over animals. They don't have rights, so we can do whatever we want. One is utilitarian, and those are folks who say animals have rights, but it kind of depends on the use. In some circumstances, the human's need for that animal kind of supersedes or outweighs what the animal's rights are, so we're going to use the animal in that circumstance because humans win, but the animals do have rights. And then there's the third option, which is abolitionist, which is sort of similar to animal rights. It's where animals have similar rights to humans, and our rights don't over or supersede theirs. Like there's really should be a balance in the rights of humans and animals. So to help us understand this, I have created a graphic that helps me understand how all these ideas relate. The big thing to remember is that this graphic is definitely mine. Like, this is how Steinken makes sense of it. It's not supported by real world data. This is just how it makes sense in my brain. So the blue line would be if you sampled the American population. I imagine people would fall somewhere in this layout according to their belief systems. Most people are going to be somewhere in the middle. Sometimes they're going to be welfarists, sometimes they're going to be rightists. It kind of depends on the issue. And that would mean that they are utilitarian according to the dominion issue. Over on, I'm going to move my photo out of the way so you guys can see the bottom of this. On the left side, we would have absolutionists, which are people who are very welfarist. They don't believe animals have rights, but that can get more and more extreme as you go. And then on the right side, animals have rights and people shouldn't be using them, and that gets more and more extreme as you go. So based on this diagram, I want you guys to take a couple minutes, pause the video, and have some quick discussions. So again, my opinion, and you can decide whether or not you agree with that, is that most people probably fall in the middle somewhere. They're okay with some uses of animals, not so much with others. And they kind of fall in this. They're sometimes welfare, sometimes rightist. It just kind of depends. But what I want you guys to discuss is take a minute and respectfully, be kind to your neighbors, discuss if you think that there's such a thing as a correct belief. And after you answer that question, I want you to look at this graph carefully and decide, do you think there's anywhere that people are wrong? And if so, where and why? So pause the video, take a couple of seconds to discuss. All right, so now that you had some interesting discussions, we're going to talk about Steinken's opinion on that question. And I'm going to share this opinion because I think it's also very similar to how our society has decided like where we can take people to court and where we can make decisions about what is right and wrong around animals. So there is this wide spectrum of belief, but on the far outer edges, on the far absolutist end and our far absolutionist end, there are some folks that make decisions that I would define as scary. They have a legal definition that falls under the terms of abuse and cruelty. If you came from a background where they say only the people on one side are scary and not the other, I would challenge you in that belief. I think if you get extreme in your beliefs, no matter what system it is, you can end up being a little scary out on the edges. So let's look a little bit at those edges. So first we need to define what abuse and cruelty mean. So abuse is to use something wrongly or improperly, or to treat something in a harmful or injurious way. So for example, if you borrow a pencil from me today, if you use it wrongly, like you throw it up and get it stuck in the ceiling, don't do it. That's an improper use of my pencil, right? It's improper and it's abusive to my pencil if you break my pencil in half. You abused my pencil, right? That's abuse. Now, the challenge for that is that can also happen to humans and animals. If we are abusive to humans and animals, it falls in the same thing. You can use an animal or a human in a wrong or improper way. You can treat an animal in an injury or an injurious way or a way that harms them. Now, where we get into this like scary people cabinet is not just that those things happen, because abuse can happen by accident. If you don't know how to properly care for a rabbit and that you need to trim their nails and you never trim their nails, you could be using them improperly. You could treat them in an injurious way, but you just didn't know any better. That doesn't mean that we can prosecute you and throw you in prison for that. It means that we need to educate you and, under extreme circumstances, maybe not allow you to have rabbits anymore, but it doesn't mean prison time, right? Where we get into the scary cabinet and where we get into fines and prison time is when people start to get to that cruelty factor. And cruelty is where abuse is happening with intent. So these are people who know that what they're doing is wrong and what they're doing is harmful, and they do it anyway. That is scary, and it can happen on both sides. So on the welfarist side, people who take that to an absolute extreme say that we can do whatever we want with animals. And these are people who are wantingly abusive and cruel to animals. They intentionally injure them. And I'm sorry, that's scary and not right. And our culture agrees with that. And you can put those people in jail. You can take them to court. There's a process. But that has been determined by our culture as being wrong, right? On the other side, you can also be wrong on the rightist side. If you go way far out on the idea that humans or that animals have the same rights as humans, and you take that to the extent that you steal somebody's seeing eye dog and you put it down because you don't think people should be allowed to use that animal, that's scary and wrong. You shouldn't be able to do that. Or sometimes people believe that so far that animals have more rights than humans, that they will like break into a laboratory, let all of the animals out of the cages and let them escape the building, and then burn the building down with people in it. That's scary and wrong. So they're scary and wrong on both sides of the perspective, and I think they both fall into the abuse and cruelty. On one side, you're being abusive and cruel to animals, and that's wrong. On the other side, because of the rights of animals or your belief in the rights of animals, you end up being abusive and cruel to people. And in either case, it's wrong and it's scary. And our culture agrees with that, and you can take those people to court. Now, the question mark is this issue of neglect. So neglect is also abuse. If you don't feed your animal or you don't feed a person, that is also abusive, right? And that can also get to the point of cruelty, but it can be a little bit more difficult to figure out where that line is when it comes to neglect. The big thing with abuse, cruelty, and neglect is this idea of if you knew that it was wrong. If you acted with intent, that's when we can prosecute you and when things get intense. So we've covered a lot of things, but this is the end of our notes today. So what I'd like you to do is just take a couple more seconds, summarize what you've learned, and record some key points on the left column of your page so that you're ready to take these notes forward. If for some reason you have some extra time in class today, I would recommend that you go ahead and work on the CATS menu, which is on page 118. So page 118, select the top 10, the $10 worth of assignments you're going to be doing, and go ahead and start doing those. You could also work with a partner to do page 123. there are some notes there, and that would be a great opportunity for you to learn a little bit more about cats as we get going. Thank you, guys.